Jessica Masker has been missing for more than a decade, and her family is still searching for answers. If this case touched you, please like, subscribe, and share this video to help keep Jessica's story alive. Every share could reach someone who knows something. What do you think happened to Jessica? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to turn on notifications for more true crime documentaries. Jessica Lynn Masker grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, surrounded by family members who would later remember her as an outgoing, energetic person who enjoyed being around others. Long before her name became associated with a missing persons case, Jessica was known as a daughter, a sister, a friend, and eventually a mother. Those closest to her often described her as someone who could bring life into a room and make people laugh. Their memories of Jessica would become especially important after her disappearance, because they provide insight into the person they believe should never be defined solely by the struggles she faced. As a child, Jessica encountered difficulties in school that were not fully understood at first. According to family members, teachers often viewed her as inattentive and believed she was not putting enough effort into her education. She struggled academically and frequently had trouble keeping pace with other students. For years, those challenges were interpreted as a lack of focus rather than a possible medical issue. Eventually, however, testing revealed that Jessica was deaf in one ear. The discovery changed the way her family understood many of the obstacles she had faced throughout her childhood. Learning that Jessica had significant hearing loss helped explain why school had been so difficult for her. Family members believed the condition affected her ability to learn and communicate in classroom settings. What had once appeared to be disinterest or poor performance now seemed connected to a challenge that had gone unrecognized for too long. Although the diagnosis provided answers, it did not erase the difficulties Jessica had already experienced. By that point, years of academic struggles had already shaped her confidence and self-image. According to relatives, Jessica carried emotional burdens connected to her hearing loss. Family members believed she experienced depression, though they said she rarely spoke openly about those feelings. They attempted to help her through counseling and support, hoping she would accept assistance and find ways to cope with the challenges she faced. However, Jessica reportedly had difficulty embracing that help. Rather than discussing her struggles, she often kept them private. Her family would later reflect on this period as one in which she appeared to be fighting battles that many people around her could not fully see. As Jessica entered her teenage years, the difficulties that had followed her through childhood continued. School remained a challenge, and eventually she left before graduating. Her decision to drop out marked a significant turning point in her life. Without a diploma and while dealing with personal struggles, Jessica faced an increasingly uncertain future. Around this time, she began experimenting with drugs. What may have started as experimentation gradually developed into addiction problems that affected many aspects of her life. Even so, Jessica's story was never defined by addiction alone. Family members consistently described her life as more complex than a single issue or label. They remembered a young woman who struggled, but who also continued, trying to find her place in the world. The documentary examines addiction as one part of a larger picture rather than the entirety of Jessica's identity. Her challenges with substance abuse existed alongside her relationships, her hopes, and her efforts to improve her circumstances. One of the most significant developments in Jessica's life was becoming a mother. She gave birth to her first son, Junior, and embraced a new role that carried both responsibility and motivation. However, her addiction created serious complications. According to available information, custody challenges followed, and Junior was placed in temporary foster care. For Jessica, this became another difficult chapter in a life already marked by obstacles. Family members recalled that Jessica fought to remain involved in her son's life. She worked toward stability and made efforts to address the issues that had contributed to the custody situation. The documentary covers her attempts at rehabilitation and periods when she tried to stay sober. Those efforts did not erase her struggles, but they demonstrated a determination to improve her circumstances and strengthen her relationship with her child. Over time, Jessica achieved important progress. After spending time in rehabilitation and working toward recovery, she was granted visitation with her son. Eventually, custody was returned to her. For her family, this development represented evidence that Jessica was capable of making meaningful changes when given support and opportunity. It also reflected her desire to be present in her child's life despite the setbacks she had experienced. The story of Jessica's early years is not simply a story of hardship. It is also a story of persistence. Again and again, family members described someone who encountered challenges but continued searching for ways to move forward. Whether facing difficulties in school, coping with hearing loss, struggling with depression, or confronting addiction, Jessica repeatedly attempted to rebuild and regain stability. That determination became a defining theme in how her loved ones remembered her. They acknowledged the mistakes she made and the hardships she endured, but they also emphasized her efforts to improve her future. Before the events that would ultimately lead to her disappearance, Jessica had already spent years trying to overcome obstacles that might have defeated others. For those who knew her best, the most important part of her story was not the setbacks themselves, but her repeated attempts to rise above them and keep moving forward. Family members also remembered that Jessica was not defined solely by the difficult periods of her life. They recalled moments when she was social, outgoing, and focused on the people she loved. Those memories remained important because they offered a fuller picture of who she was before she disappeared. As the years passed, relatives continued describing a woman who faced setbacks, but still searched for opportunities to change direction. Their accounts consistently returned to the same idea. Jessica wanted a better future. She struggled, she made mistakes, and she experienced consequences. Yet she continued trying to rebuild relationships, improve her circumstances, and create stability for herself and her family whenever chances appeared again. Jessica Masker entered adulthood carrying challenges that had followed her for years, but relatives said she was still trying to improve her circumstances. Without a high school diploma and while dealing with addiction, stable employment opportunities were difficult to find. According to available reports, Jessica worked as a dancer at a local strip club after struggling to secure other work. The documentary presents this part of her life without judgment and focuses instead on the realities she faced. Family members described a young woman attempting to support herself while managing personal difficulties that continued to affect many areas of her life. The circumstances surrounding Jessica's employment reflected broader struggles rather than a single decision. Limited education, financial pressure, and ongoing addiction problems created barriers that made stability difficult to achieve. Those who knew her said she often found herself trying to recover from setbacks while also searching for opportunities to move forward. Even during periods when progress seemed difficult, family members believed Jessica continued looking for ways to improve her future. Their memories portray someone whose life contained both challenges and determination, a combination that would remain important when examining the period leading up to her disappearance. During this same stage of her life, Jessica became involved in a relationship that relatives later described as unhealthy and abusive. The man involved has never been publicly identified in the information provided, but he would become a significant figure in discussions surrounding Jessica's disappearance. Family members stated that the relationship contributed negatively to her life, and that abuse was part of the dynamic between them. Instead, it presents the relationship as another difficulty Jessica was attempting to navigate while dealing with other personal struggles. According to family accounts, the relationship also coincided with continued addiction problems. As Jessica attempted to manage one challenge, additional complications emerged in other areas of her life. Relatives believed that the boyfriend furthered her addiction and contributed to an already unstable situation. Despite these difficulties, Jessica continued maintaining connections with her family and remained involved in the lives of the people she loved. Those connections would later shape the way relatives interpreted her disappearance. They believed her actions during the months before she vanished showed someone who was still invested in her future, rather than someone preparing to walk away from it. A major development occurred when Jessica became pregnant with her second child. The pregnancy introduced new responsibilities and renewed concerns among family members about her well-being. 2 months before her disappearance, she gave birth to a baby boy. According to reports, the child was born prematurely and required treatment at Riley Children's Hospital. The infant was also reported to have been born with drug exposure and needed intensive medical care. These circumstances created another difficult chapter in Jessica's life. At the same time, relatives later pointed to this period as evidence that she was beginning to think seriously about long-term changes. Family members recalled that Jessica visited her newborn son regularly while he remained hospitalized. They said those visits demonstrated how important her children were to her. According to relatives, Jessica frequently spoke about changing her life and creating a better future. The birth of her younger son appeared to strengthen her desire to move in a different direction. While her past continued to present challenges, family members believed she was increasingly focused on what came next. Their accounts describe a mother who recognized the seriousness of her circumstances and who wanted to make meaningful improvements for the benefit of her children. Around this time, Jessica reportedly began pursuing her GED. For relatives, that decision represented more than an educational goal. It symbolized an attempt to address unfinished parts of her past and build a stronger foundation for the future. Family members said she discussed plans for improving her life and spoke about opportunities that might become available if she completed her education. The documentary presents these efforts as part of a broader pattern. Rather than giving up after years of difficulties, Jessica appeared to be searching for practical ways to create stability. Her goals reflected a desire for progress, despite the obstacles she continued facing. The contrast between Jessica's past and her future plans became increasingly important after she disappeared. Family members repeatedly emphasized that she was actively working toward change during the months before she vanished. They pointed to her visits with her newborn son, her pursuit of a GED, and her discussions about rebuilding her life as evidence of that commitment. Relatives acknowledged that she still faced serious challenges, including addiction and personal instability. However, they believed those difficulties existed alongside genuine efforts to improve her circumstances. In their view, Jessica's life at that time was defined not only by struggle but also by determination. As relatives reflected on this period, they often returned to the idea that Jessica had reasons to remain engaged with her future. She had 2 children, educational goals, and plans she reportedly discussed with people around her. Family members believed she wanted to reconnect more fully with her children and create a better life for them. Those ambitions did not erase the difficulties she faced, but they provided direction and purpose. The documentary carefully documents these accounts, because they help explain how loved ones viewed Jessica's mindset before she disappeared, and why they continue to emphasize the goals she had established. For Jessica's family, the importance of this chapter extends beyond the events themselves. It represents the period when they saw her making efforts to move forward despite years of hardship. They remembered a mother visiting her hospitalized child, discussing plans for change, and pursuing educational opportunities that had once seemed out of reach. Those memories became central to their understanding of what happened afterward. Because Jessica appeared focused on rebuilding her life and strengthening her relationships with her children, relatives found it difficult to believe she would willingly abandon those goals. That belief remains a lasting part of their search for answers. April 14, 2013 marked the beginning of the final known 48 hours before Jessica Masker disappeared. By that point, the 24-year-old mother of 2 was facing numerous challenges, including addiction, family difficulties, and an unstable personal life. Yet she was also attempting to rebuild her future. The events that unfolded during the next 2 days would become the focus of investigators and family members searching for answers after she vanished. According to available information, a domestic dispute occurred between Jessica and her boyfriend on April 14. Reports indicate that the incident became serious enough for authorities to become involved. Jessica was transported to a hospital following the dispute, while her boyfriend was reportedly arrested. The details surrounding the altercation have not been fully outlined in the available information, but the event became significant because it occurred immediately before Jessica disappeared. The domestic violence incident later drew attention from investigators examining Jessica's disappearance. because her boyfriend had been among the last known people connected to her during those final days. Detectives questioned him during the missing persons investigation. Authorities ultimately stated that they found no evidence connecting him to Jessica's disappearance. He has never been publicly identified as a suspect. Nevertheless, the events of April 14 remained an important part of the timeline because they represented a major disruption in Jessica's life just hours before she vanished. After being released from the hospital, Jessica reportedly returned to behavior that had been part of her ongoing struggle with addiction. According to reports, she went looking for drugs shortly after leaving medical care. At some point afterward, she suffered an overdose. This development added another layer of instability to an already difficult situation. The overdose illustrated how quickly circumstances were changing around Jessica during the final days before she disappeared. Following the overdose, Jessica was involuntarily admitted to a rehabilitation facility. The placement represented an effort to address the immediate crisis she was experiencing. However, her stay was brief. Available information indicates that she checked herself out only a few hours later. The documentary presents this development not as an isolated event, but as part of the broader pattern of challenges Jessica had been facing for years. Family members had watched her struggle with addiction, attempt recovery, experience setbacks, and continue searching for stability. The events of April 14 and April 15 reflected that ongoing battle. After leaving the rehabilitation center, Jessica needed a place to stay. She eventually went to her cousin's residence. This location would become one of the last confirmed places where Jessica was known to be before her disappearance. Family members later described this period as one marked by uncertainty and emotional turmoil. Jessica had recently experienced a violent dispute, a hospitalization, an overdose, and a brief rehabilitation stay. Within a very short period of time, several major events had occurred, each contributing to an increasingly unstable situation. Despite these circumstances, Jessica remained in contact with family members and continued moving between locations. At some point after arriving at her cousin's residence, an argument reportedly occurred between the two. The exact subject of the disagreement has not been publicly detailed in the information provided. What is known is that the argument ended with Jessica deciding to leave. Around 3 a.m. on April 15, 2013, Jessica walked away from her cousin's residence on foot. That departure became one of the most important moments in the timeline. Once she left the house, her movements became increasingly difficult to track. Investigators and family members would later spend years attempting to reconstruct what happened during the hours that followed. Reports indicate that Jessica headed toward a nearby gas station after leaving the residence. The gas station became a key location in the investigation because it was among the last places connected to her before she disappeared. Investigators later worked to establish her movements in the area, attempting to understand where she went and who she may have encountered. Information gathered after her disappearance suggests that Jessica also spent time in areas known for drug activity during those early morning hours. Family members have expressed their belief that she may have been attempting to obtain drugs after leaving her cousin's home. However, this has never been conclusively established. The documentary presents this possibility as a belief expressed by relatives rather than a confirmed fact. What is clear is that Jessica's movements during the early morning hours of April 15 placed her in locations that would later become central to the investigation. The period after she left her cousin's residence contains some of the final known pieces of information regarding her whereabouts. Investigators would later examine these locations carefully, hoping they might reveal clues about what happened next. As the night turned into morning, Jessica remained away from family members and continued moving through the area. The timeline during these hours remains incomplete, but available information indicates that she was still communicating with people close to her. Those communications would soon become among the most important pieces of evidence available in the case. The final hours before Jessica disappeared remain critical because they established the sequence of events that investigators continue to examine years later. A domestic violence incident, a hospitalization, an overdose, a rehabilitation stay, an argument with her cousin, and her departure on foot all occurred within a remarkably short period of time. Each event contributed to the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. By the time Jessica left her cousin's residence around 3:00 a.m., the stage had been set for the final confirmed interactions of her life. She had moved through multiple locations, experienced several personal crises, and entered a period where her movements became increasingly uncertain. The next developments would involve a series of phone calls and statements that remain among the most discussed elements of her disappearance. Those communications would provide some of the last known insights into Jessica's whereabouts before all confirmed traces of her came to an end. During the early morning hours of April 15, 2013, Jessica Masker made what would become some of the final known communications of her life. Years later, investigators and family members would continue examining those conversations, searching for clues that might explain what happened after she disappeared. Although several details from that morning have been reported, one aspect of the timeline remains unclear. Different sources identify different recipients for Jessica's final call. Some accounts state that she contacted her brother, while others report that she called her mother. Rather than attempting to resolve the discrepancy, the available information acknowledges that conflicting reports exist regarding who received the call. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the recipient, the content of the conversation has remained one of the most discussed elements of the case. According to reports, Jessica told her family member that two men had come at her wrong. The statement immediately stood out because it was made shortly before she vanished. More than a decade later, it remains one of the most significant and frequently referenced details associated with her disappearance. The phrase itself raises questions, but publicly available information provides few answers. Investigators have never publicly identified the two men Jessica referenced during the conversation. Their names have not been released, and no publicly known evidence has established exactly who they were. There is also no confirmed information explaining where Jessica encountered them, whether she knew them previously, or what specifically prompted her concern. As a result, the statement remains important, not because it answers questions, but because it highlights how many questions remain unresolved. Family members and investigators have revisited the comment repeatedly over the years. The timing of the statement naturally drew attention because it occurred so close to Jessica's disappearance. Yet, despite the interest surrounding it, the available facts remain limited. No public records explain the intentions of the two men or confirm whether they had any connection to the events that followed. The documentary therefore focuses on what is known rather than speculation. Jessica reported an encounter that made her uncomfortable, but the details surrounding that encounter have never been publicly clarified. During the same conversation, Jessica reportedly sought assistance getting home. According to available accounts, she requested a ride from the family members she contacted. However, transportation was not available. One report states that her brother was already on his way to work and could not pick her up. He reportedly suggested that she contact their mother for a ride. Regardless of which version of events is accurate, the outcome appears consistent. Jessica did not receive transportation from family members that morning. After being unable to secure a ride, Jessica made another call. This time, she contacted her boyfriend. That communication would become another critical part of the investigation because it helped establish her plans during the final known hours before she vanished. Investigators later stated that Jessica informed her boyfriend she was at a gas station. During the conversation, she reportedly explained that she intended to walk down East Washington Street. Authorities believe she planned to meet him after leaving the area. The exact details surrounding those plans remain limited, but the communication helped investigators develop a clearer picture of Jessica's intended movements during the morning of April 15. The area surrounding East Washington Street would later become central to the investigation. Reports indicate that Jessica was last seen near Washington Street and DeQuincy on Indianapolis's east side. This location became one of the final confirmed points connected to her disappearance. Investigators examined the area while attempting to determine where Jessica went after the phone calls ended. At the time she disappeared, Jessica was 24 years old. She was described as standing approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing around 95 pounds. She had brown hair and hazel eyes. These details became important components of missing person bulletins distributed after her disappearance. Jessica's clothing on the morning she vanished was also documented. Reports indicate that she was wearing a red and black jacket with a fur-lined hood, a pair of jeans, and gray and pink tennis shoes. These details provided investigators and the public with a description of her appearance during the final confirmed hours of her life. Authorities also documented several distinctive tattoos that could help identify Jessica. She had the name Rob tattooed on her left wrist and the word Lil tattooed on the inside of her right wrist. Additional tattoos included a large flower on her back, a tattoo located on her upper right arm and shoulder, the name Travis on the back of her neck, and a vine tattoo on her right leg. These identifying features became part of efforts to locate her after she disappeared. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, the phone calls remained among the most significant pieces of information available. They provided insight into Jessica's movements, her state of mind, and her plans during the hours before she vanished. They also established the final known sequence of events. Jessica had spoken with a family member about two men who had concerned her. She attempted to arrange transportation home. Unable to obtain a ride, she contacted her boyfriend and discussed meeting him after walking along East Washington Street. After those conversations, the timeline becomes far less certain. Investigators believe Jessica continued moving through the area, but no publicly available information establishes exactly where she went next. The absence of confirmed information after the phone calls has become one of the defining features of the case. No verified sightings of Jessica have been publicly reported since that morning. No confirmed communications have surfaced. There has been no publicly documented financial activity attributed to her after her disappearance. Family members have not reported receiving messages, phone calls, or other indications that she remained in contact after April 15, 2013. As the hours turned into days and the days turned into years, the importance of those final conversations only increased. The phone calls represent some of the last confirmed information investigators possess regarding Jessica's whereabouts and intentions. They provide a partial picture of her final known movements, but they do not explain what happened after she walked away. The final confirmed timeline therefore ends with a series of unanswered questions. Jessica spoke with a family member. She mentioned two unidentified men. She attempted to obtain a ride home. She contacted her boyfriend and discussed walk down East Washington Street. Then, sometime after those communications ended, she disappeared. Since that morning, no publicly verified evidence has emerged that conclusively explains where Jessica went or what happened to her. Her final phone calls remain among the most important and enduring pieces of information in the investigation. After Jessica Masker disappeared on April 15, 2013, investigators began the difficult task of determining what happened during the final hours of her known movements. The available timeline provided several locations, a series of phone calls, and a number of individuals who may have interacted with Jessica shortly before she vanished. Despite those starting points, the investigation quickly encountered challenges that would continue for years. More than a decade later, many of the same questions remain unanswered. Law enforcement focused first on reconstructing Jessica's final known movements. Detectives reviewed information related to the places she had reportedly visited during the hours before her disappearance. This included locations connected to her cousin's residence, the gas station where she was reportedly seen, and areas associated with drug activity. Investigators attempted to identify people who may have encountered Jessica during that period and interviewed numerous individuals believed to have information about her whereabouts. According to available reports, detectives spoke with people connected to locations Jessica was believed to have visited shortly before she disappeared. Some of these locations were reportedly known for drug activity. Because Jessica had struggled with addiction and was believed to have spent time in those environments, investigators considered it important to identify individuals who might have seen her or interacted with her during the early morning hours of April 15. However, obtaining information proved difficult. Authorities publicly acknowledged that some people were reluctant to cooperate. Investigators reportedly believed certain individuals may have avoided speaking openly, because of their own involvement with drugs or concerns about interacting with law enforcement. As a result, detectives faced obstacles while attempting to establish a complete timeline of Jessica's final movements. The lack of cooperation became one of the most significant challenges in the investigation. Even when investigators identified people connected to relevant locations, gathering reliable information was not always possible. Over time, family members and investigators alike expressed frustration that potential witnesses may not have been fully forthcoming. Whether those individuals possessed important information remains unknown, but the difficulty of obtaining answers became a recurring theme throughout the case. Another important focus of the investigation involved Jessica's boyfriend. His role attracted attention because of the domestic violence incident that occurred shortly before Jessica disappeared. Reports indicate that Jessica was hospitalized following a dispute with him on April 14, 2013, and that he was subsequently arrested. Because the incident took place immediately before Jessica vanished, investigators naturally examined his potential connection to the case. Detectives questioned the boyfriend during the investigation and attempted to determine whether he had any involvement in Jessica's disappearance. Authorities also examined information related to Jessica's plans to meet him during the early morning hours of April 15. According to available reports, Jessica contacted him after being unable to secure a ride from family members. She reportedly told him she was at a gas station and intended to walk down East Washington Street. Despite these circumstances, investigators publicly stated that they found no evidence linking him to Jessica's disappearance. He has never been publicly named as a suspect. The documentary, therefore, presents his role as part of the investigation while remaining within the limits of the available facts. Law enforcement examined his connection to the case, but no public evidence has emerged establishing his involvement. As the investigation continued, a notable difference emerged between the perspectives of law enforcement and Jessica's family. Several reports indicate that police did not publicly conclude that foul play was involved in Jessica's disappearance. Family members, however, strongly disagreed with that position. Relatives have consistently maintained that Jessica would not have voluntarily abandoned her life. Their belief is based on several factors that they have repeated throughout the years. One of the most significant is Jessica's relationship with her children. Family members point to her role as a mother and her efforts to remain involved in her children's lives. They argue that those relationships gave her strong reasons to stay connected to her family and future. Relatives also emphasize the positive changes Jessica appeared to be pursuing before she disappeared. According to family members, she was visiting her newborn son regularly and had begun working toward obtaining her GED. They recall conversations in which Jessica discussed plans to improve her life and create a better future. To them, these goals demonstrated that she was focused on moving forward rather than disappearing voluntarily. Another factor influencing the family's perspective is the complete absence of contact since April 2013. According to available information, Jessica has not been seen or heard from since the morning she vanished. Family members have not reported receiving messages, phone calls, or other communication from her. For relatives, the lack of contact is difficult to reconcile with the image of someone who cared deeply about her children and family relationships. Because no definitive explanation has emerged, the case continues to be defined by several unanswered questions. Among the most important is the identity of the two men Jessica referenced during her final phone call. According to reports, Jessica told a family member that two men had come at her wrong. The statement remains one of the most discussed aspects of the case. Yet years later, no publicly available information identifies the men or explains their connection, if any, to Jessica's disappearance. Another unanswered question involves Jessica's plans after the phone calls ended. Investigators believe she intended to meet her boyfriend. However, publicly available information has not established whether that meeting actually occurred. Determining whether Jessica successfully reached the person she planned to see remains a significant unresolved issue. Questions also remain about what happened after Jessica left the gas station area. The gas station and surrounding streets represent some of the final confirmed locations connected to her movements. Beyond that point, the timeline becomes uncertain. Investigators have never publicly explained exactly where Jessica went next, or who may have encountered her. The absence of definitive information has also led to another persistent question. Why has no one come forward with information capable of resolving the case? Investigators spent years interviewing individuals connected to Jessica's final known movements, yet no publicly known witness account has fully explained what happened. Whether important information remains undisclosed is unknown, but the question continues to linger. Closely related to that issue is the possibility that individuals present at locations Jessica reportedly visited may have known more than they shared. Authorities openly acknowledge difficulties obtaining information from some people connected to those locations. However, no public evidence confirms whether anyone intentionally withheld information or possessed knowledge capable of solving the case. The investigation into Jessica Masker's disappearance therefore remains defined not by conclusions but by unanswered questions. Detectives interviewed witnesses, examined relationships, reviewed locations, and followed available leads. Family members continued searching for answers while maintaining their belief that foul play occurred. Yet, despite years of effort, the central mystery remains unresolved. Who were the two men Jessica mentioned? Did she meet the person she intended to see? What happened after she left the area near the gas station? Did someone witness crucial events and never come forward? More than a decade after Jessica disappeared, those questions remain at the center of an investigation that continues without definitive answers. April 15, 2013, marked the last day Jessica Masker's family heard from her. What followed was not only a missing persons investigation, but also years of uncertainty that would affect every part of their lives. As days turned into months and months turned into years, Jessica's parents, siblings, children, and extended family were left facing a question that remained unanswered. What happened to Jessica? For many families of missing persons, uncertainty becomes its own burden. Without clear answers, there is no resolution and no ability to move forward completely. Jessica's relatives have spoken publicly about the emotional toll her disappearance has taken on them. More than a decade after she vanished, they continue living with the reality that they do not know whether Jessica is alive or deceased. Every birthday, holiday, and family gathering serves as a reminder that someone important is missing. Family members have repeatedly described Jessica as a daughter, sister, and mother whose absence continues to leave a void. Their search for answers has never been limited to determining what happened. It has also been about preserving Jessica's memory and ensuring that she is not forgotten. Throughout the years, relatives have remained committed to keeping her name in the public eye and encouraging people to continue talking about her case. Part of their frustration has centered on what they perceive as a lack of attention given to Jessica's disappearance. Some family members have expressed concerns that her history of addiction affected how the public viewed her case. They have questioned whether assumptions about her past may have influenced the level of attention her disappearance received. Relatives have emphasized that regardless of personal struggles, Jessica deserved the same concern and effort afforded to any missing person. Statements made by family members over the years reveal a consistent theme. They believe Jessica's disappearance should never have been dismissed or overlooked. They have argued that her addiction history does not define who she was as a person. Instead, they encourage others to remember the broader picture of her life, including her relationships with her children, her efforts to improve her circumstances, and her hopes for the future. As time passed without significant developments, Jessica's family became increasingly active in their own search for answers. Rather than waiting passively for information to emerge, relatives reportedly pursued leads themselves. According to available reports, family members visited locations Jessica was known to frequent and attempted to speak directly with people connected to her life. They searched for information wherever they believed it might be found. These efforts were not always easy. Pursuing leads often meant revisiting painful aspects of Jessica's life, including locations associated with addiction and people she may have encountered before her disappearance. Nevertheless, relatives remained determined to explore every possibility available to them. Their actions reflected a belief that someone, somewhere, knew what happened to Jessica. Among the items family members believe could be important is a diary reportedly kept by Jessica. According to relatives, the diary contained names, addresses, contact information, and personal writings connected to her daily life. Family members have described it as a record of people Jessica knew and places she visited. The diary has received attention because relatives believe it may provide insight into the individuals Jessica interacted with before she disappeared. Family members have suggested that information contained within its pages could help explain aspects of her final days. The documentary does not speculate about specific names or accusations connected to the diary. Instead, it focuses on the significance family members attach to it and their belief that it may contain information relevant to the investigation. Over the years, Jessica's relatives have also worked to keep public awareness of the case alive. Their efforts have included interviews, social media campaigns, vigils, community outreach, and events dedicated to remembering Jessica. These activities serve two purposes. First, they honor Jessica and preserve her memory. Second, they encourage anyone with information to come forward. Family members have repeatedly emphasized that public awareness remains important because someone may still possess information capable of helping investigators. Even after many years, they continue encouraging people to share Jessica's story and discuss her disappearance. They hope that renewed attention could lead to new information. One particularly meaningful event occurred during a balloon release, held in honor of what would have been Jessica's 34th birthday. The gathering brought family members together to celebrate her life while also reminding the public that she remains missing. During the event, relatives expressed both hope and frustration. They spoke about their desire for answers and their determination to continue searching. Statements made by family members during public appearances reveal the emotional complexity of living with a long-term missing persons case. Some relatives have spoken about hoping Jessica will one day walk through the door. Others have focused on the need for information, regardless of what that information might reveal. While the emotions expressed vary, the underlying message remains consistent. They want answers, and they refuse to give up searching for them. The family has also supported fundraising efforts designed to help maintain awareness of the case. In 2021, friends and relatives helped launch a GoFundMe campaign intended to raise money for a reward related to Jessica's disappearance. The effort reflected their continued commitment to finding information that could help solve the case. Throughout the years, Jessica's family has repeatedly reminded the public that she was more than the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. They remember her as someone who loved her children, enjoyed being around people, and continued trying to improve her life despite setbacks. Their goal has been to ensure that Jessica remains recognized as a person rather than simply a case file. More than a decade after she disappeared, the central facts remain unchanged. Jessica Masker was 24 years old when she vanished during the early morning hours of April 15, 2013. Before disappearing, she reportedly spoke with a family member and mentioned two unidentified men who had come at her wrong. She later contacted her boyfriend and discussed plans to walk along East Washington Street. After those communications ended, all confirmed traces of Jessica disappeared. The investigation remains open, and Jessica remains missing. No publicly verified evidence has emerged explaining exactly what happened after her final phone calls. The questions that existed in 2013 continue to exist today, and family members continue searching for answers. For Jessica's relatives, keeping her story alive is both a responsibility and an act of hope. Every interview, public event, social media post, and memorial gathering reflects their determination to ensure she is not forgotten. They continue asking for information and encouraging anyone who may know something to come forward. Anyone with information regarding Jessica Masker's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department Missing Persons Unit at 310-327-6160 or missingpersonsindy.gov. Information can also be provided to Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana at 317-262 TIPS. Jessica's family continues to believe that even the smallest detail could prove significant. Until answers are found, their search continues, and Jessica Masker's story remains unfinished. The investigation into Jessica Masker's disappearance is closely tied to a handful of locations connected to the final known hours before she vanished. While many questions remain unanswered, investigators and family members have spent years examining these places because they represent the last documented points in Jessica's timeline. Each location provides a small piece of information about where she was, who she may have encountered, and what might have happened during the early morning hours of April 15, 2013. One of the most important locations is the residence of Jessica's cousin. After leaving a rehabilitation facility, Jessica went to stay there during the final hours before her disappearance. According to available reports, she spent part of April 14 and the early morning hours of April 15 at the home. This residence is significant because it represents the last confirmed location where family members and acquaintances can account for Jessica's whereabouts with certainty. At some point during the night, Jessica and her cousin reportedly became involved in an argument. The details of the disagreement have never been publicly explained in available reports. What is known is that the argument ended with Jessica deciding to leave. Around 3 a.m., she walked away from the residence on foot. That moment became a critical point in the investigation because it marked the beginning of the final period of known movement before she disappeared. Once Jessica left her cousin's residence, investigators believe she headed toward a nearby gas station. The gas station quickly became one of the most important locations connected to the case. Multiple reports placed Jessica there during the early morning hours of April 15. It was also the location she reportedly referenced during one of her final phone conversations. The significance of the gas station comes from its position in the timeline. It serves as one of the last confirmed places associated with Jessica before all verified traces of her ended. Investigators later worked to understand her movements in and around the area, hoping to identify people who may have seen her or interacted with her. Family members also focused on the location because it represented one of the final known points where Jessica was still in contact with others. The investigation then extends beyond the gas station and into the surrounding area. Available reports indicate that Jessica planned to walk along East Washington Street. During a phone conversation with her boyfriend, she reportedly stated that she was at the gas station and intended to continue walking down Washington Street. Authorities later indicated that they believed she planned to meet him. East Washington Street became a central focus because it represents part of Jessica's final known route. Investigators attempted to reconstruct her movements through the area and determine where she may have gone after leaving the gas station. Reports place some of her final known movements near Washington Street and DeQuincy on Indianapolis's east side. For detectives, the area surrounding Washington Street and DeQuincy became especially important because it represents one of the last locations connected to Jessica before she vanished. While the exact route she traveled remains uncertain, the available information consistently points investigators back to this part of the city. Family members have also repeatedly referenced the location because it marks the area where Jessica was last known to be. Another location connected to the investigation involves reports that Jessica may have visited a residence associated with drug activity during the hours before she disappeared. According to information provided by family members and reports connected to the case, Jessica may have spent time inside a house known for drug activity shortly before making her final phone call. This reported location attracted investigative attention because of Jessica's statement that two men had come at her wrong. Although no publicly available information identifies the men or explains the circumstances surrounding the encounter, investigators recognize the importance of determining who may have been present at locations Jessica reportedly visited that night. As a result, detectives later interviewed individuals connected to places Jessica was believed to have visited before her disappearance. Authorities publicly acknowledged difficulties obtaining information from some people associated with these locations. Investigators reportedly believed that addiction issues and reluctance to speak with police may have limited cooperation from certain individuals. The residence reportedly connected to drug activity, therefore became important, not because investigators publicly linked it to Jessica's disappearance, but because it was one of the last known locations potentially connected to her movements. Detectives hoped that people familiar with the location might possess information capable of helping establish a clearer timeline. When viewed together, these locations form the final documented path of Jessica Masker's known movements. Her cousin's residence marks the last confirmed place where others could account for her whereabouts. The gas station became one of the final confirmed locations associated with her. East Washington Street represents the route she reportedly planned to travel. Washington Street and DeQuincy became the area most closely connected to her last known movements. The reported drug house remains a location investigators examined because of possible connections to people Jessica encountered before she vanished. More than a decade later, these places continue to occupy an important role in the investigation. They are significant not because they provide answers, but because they represent the final locations connected to Jessica before all confirmed traces disappeared. Investigators have long believed that individuals familiar with these places may still pose